Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, or living life, or loving life. Coming at you tonight to talk about the American citizenship. Like we spoke last night with the usufruct and subrogation. That's what was actually usufructed, what was subrogated. You gave up your American citizenship for United States citizenship as a resident in a state. So we're going to go over some of those details tonight. And we're going to start out with the American interest. American interest. And this goes to protection of American interests, as you saw in the title, which we will be speaking about later. But first, we have to go over the interests of the United States. So we're going to do that. And we're going to get started with it here. And what it says, this is the AmericanInterest.com, the financial infrastructure of corruption, folks. Euro dollars and kleptocracy. The parallels between tax optimization and corruption are so strong because they rely on the same mechanisms to get the job done. And I haven't read this yet, but I'm going to tell you it's because of the indoctrination of the public education system. They don't teach you this stuff, and this is why it's important that you learn it on your own. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the same situation as people like myself, growing up in an economy-based system that leaves out your spirituality, and you find out in your adult age that you've been fucked repeatedly because you thought you had the education that would supply you with the needs to maintain the rest of your life in this economic structure, when it doesn't. It makes you a slave. So, it says national security practitioners have become increasingly aware of the threat of kleptocratic regimes and strategic corruption to the internal politics of liberal democratic polities. In the classical version of this narrative, authoritarian regimes exploit global financial and business networks to penetrate the internal politics of democratic societies and secure their domestic role by exploiting the self-interest of particular business groups. Does that sound like Washington, D.C., folks? Some have even suggested that foreign dark money might enter the democratic process by supporting particular candidates. And we've spoken about this topic several times, and you hear it all the time. It's two parties, but they have the same goal, and their argument in the public venue is to help indoctrinate you into a fear regime. The common thread that unites these views is that dark money is seen as a foreign policy problem and thus related to their extra systemic actors or foreign competitors that exploit legitimate systems. This is the capitalism. Dark money are your private investors that are investing in you, remaining you, EWE or YOU, as that term is defined in their code as a person who owes a debt to the United States, a corporate entity. You cannot possibly owe a debt to a corporate entity when you are born. Viewing this issue as only the result of corruption or as an aspect of power politics alone is flawed. The dangers highlighted above are not the result of aberrations in otherwise functioning system that can be patched by some legal reforms. Rather, they are a feature of how the international financial system has evolved to serve the world's most powerful, whether they are kleptocrats in the developing world or reputable Fortune 500 companies. The capitalist society. The global financial infrastructure, as it has evolved in the post-war period, requires vast pools of offshore dollar accounts. Did you know that Social Security account is an offshore account? So-called Eurodollars. This credit money issued at the bookmaker's pen. This credit money that is like sovereign citizen. They do not match. It is either money or its equivalent. It is not the same, and therefore is not credit money, nor could it be money credit. It is money or credit. They are equivalent, but not of like kind. Forms the basis for global payments and currency exchange. Remember, I said that the Postal Global Trust Services, that's what provides the postal services for every account in those 193 countries. That is the Global Postal Trust Services. All of those accounts that are posted are under the Global Postal Trust. It's an international vital statistics bureau. It's an international statistics bureau. Within these money pools, often held in tax havens with opaque ownership law, it is impossible to distinguish kleptocratic activity, threats from legitimate tax optimization by multinational corporations and high net worth individuals, those investors. Moreover, without these wholesale money market deposits, the global monetary system would find itself short of liquidity, as even formal bank institutions are deeply intertwined with offshore finance. Instead of viewing these activities as national security threats created by the exploitation of legitimate financing system by illegitimate actors, any attempt to curtail these activities must be done in the context of a radical reform of a global monetary order. So you see, we are already on a global structure of the monetary system. It is already a one world order, and it has been a one world order for a long time. This is not simply an academic distinction. If one sees kleptocracy as simply a form of corruption, the solutions presented are traditional anti-corruption measures focused on transparency and the strengthening of civil society. This is what I'm trying to help folks. You need to learn the civics of how this stuff works. However, if we accept a systemic perspective that incorporates the centrality of offshore cash pools to the dollar system, then we must take a broader perspective that calls for a wholesale monetary reform and the mobilization of U.S. monetary power, specifically to move toward a systemic form of global capitalism itself. To form definition, the formal definition of a Eurodollar is a dollar deposit in a non-American domiciled banking institution. As such, Eurodollars are pure credit instruments and not money. They have no formal backing at the United States Federal Reserve. That means that unlike onshore credit money, Eurodollars have no explicit guarantee for their par value. As such, Eurodollars are secured via a set of interbank funding agreements, those negotiable instruments, benchmarked by the London Interbank Overnight Rate, LIBOR. Eurodollar deposits emerge when non-American domiciled firms book a dollar inflow in non-American domiciled banks. These banks then ultimately lend these deposits to other financial institutions that require immediate dollar funding and expect a dollar denominated inflow at some period, some future period. The creation of a euro dollar deposit is represented in Figure 1 through a set of stylized balance sheets. This is what your ledger looks like. There's a T ledger here on this side for them. Okay? The bank, say Social Security or whatever. This is the American institution here. And when they do their books, they do both the debt and credit side. When they issue or when they record your stuff, you only end up with a debit. You have to balance your side by letting them know the credits. This is the problem. People don't understand there's a double book entry system, and they're entering both sides on theirs, but only one side on yours. You have to give them notice of the credit. You can only do that in the beginning if you get a document, like I said, and you know how to construct it, and it's not for your benefit. You need to line item veto and overwrite the particular terms that are detrimental to you so that they become beneficial. While doing that, you cannot be detrimental to the other party. All you can do is make sure that you receive your benefit. They're going to get benefit. It's already written in there. All you can do is equate it, equalize it. As we can see, euro dollars are initially funded through an interbank transaction with a U.S. domiciled bank and its foreign branch. From the point of view of onshore money system, no actual dollars have left the United States. It's on a credit transaction, a credit transfer. They just change the numbers electronically. The money stays where it's at. However, credit has now been issued that can ultimately be multiplied many times over to create a system of dollar funding. Moreover, the term euro dollar is often used not only to describe this specific type of money market instrument described above, but also the larger global market for wholesale dollar funding. This market and its instruments, money market fund shares, repurchase agreement, which is repos, and asset-backed commercial paper. Asset-backed commercial paper. That's those negotiable instruments. And when you do it right, you do not sign over your rights, titles, and interest in the property. You maintain that property, and that is the asset. Form the backbone of global shadow banking system. One can think of shadow banking as the expansion of the category of banking beyond registered bank holding companies. This is the sharing of your data elements. There is a robust academic debate as to what counts for deposits within this system, but a general consensus is that the key to the shadow banking system's operations are large institutional cash pools, often held in offshore banking jurisdictions. These pools of euro-dollar deposits, essentially credit entries, require cash inflows to validate holdings. As such, an army of money managers has arisen to attempt to find returns for these large global pools of cash. The euro system dollar is thus a hybrid insofar as dollar denomination depends on a state action. The U.S. issued dollar, but is intermediated by and created through private credit. Before we go any further, I want to explain to you people, you are the private credit. These financial and fictional institutions cannot have credit of their own because they can't have assets of their own. Everything extends from you, your signature, and your labor. Everything. You are the credit for everything that is created in this system. And again, you have to take fault for that. When you learn how to take fault and educate yourself, you can then correct it through your own recourse and not by other legal means. That legal means, like I said in that thing, is not going to help you. Like I said, if you want equity, you must first come with equity. That leaves everything out of legal. It dismisses the entire legal system. It is not a court of law. It is a court of equity, and they are distinctly different. Greetings, I-Man. How you doing tonight, sister? You're muted.
I thank you. I am so well. I am so good, and I'm so grateful. I thank you.
Good to hear that. We're going to continue on then, and it says the next one. This is not accidental arrangement, folks, but a set of political choices. A popular legend holds that the offshore dollar market was created when the USSR, fearful of seizure, wanted to hold its dollar deposits outside of American banks. Is that telling you that one time the USSR was holding their dollar deposits inside American banks? Think about what's being said here and learn how to read in between the lines. More realistically, the euro dollar market seems to have arisen through intercorporate swaps of currency liabilities. It's all a big insurance scheme, like I said, and you are not required to be insured. You just have to know where the assets are and how to protect them. They are yours. Designed to get around Bretton Woods era capital controls. I say we are still in the Bretton Woods era capital controls. These swaps evolved into markets and eventually became the source of funding for offshore issued euro bonds. And if you remember, what was it? The Enron case. That was about mortgage swaps. Now we're dealing with credit default swaps. It's intercorporate swaps, and the only reason they can swap is because you act as a corporate individual.
So, Keith, is that where the subrogation comes in?
Absolutely. As soon as you're born, it's deemed that you need insurance, and they construct that burial trust, and it's done in a corporate fashion, and then nobody ever corrects that record. In the 1970s, as the Bretton Woods system began to collapse, regulators began to give up on efforts to coordinate to control this system, and financial globalization was born. More importantly, a whole industry of consultants. Remember that firm? When they put that firm name, it's because they have to consult with the individual. It's a consultation, and you are listed as a consultant firm. Often with the encouragement of major governments, sprang up to offer newly decolonized states, often with common law systems, roadmaps to becoming offshore financial centers. This is why I spoke about setting up an offshore account. The existence of shadow banking and wholesale euro-dollar financing makes it increasingly difficult to draw specific borders between national and global financial systems, and between legitimate transactions and kleptocratic activities and strategic corruption. Disclosures of offshore structures, such as the Panama Papers, Panama Canal, reveal a mix of both of obviously political corruption and normal corporate tax optimization. An anatomy of several transactions demonstrates just how similar and indistinguishable both activities are. Take the double Irish tax structure favored by pharmaceutical and technology companies. Company A in California develops a piece of software. It sells the patent for this software to a wholly owned subsidiary in the Cayman Islands for $1. That subsidiary then revalues the patent to $100, pays no taxes on that reevaluation. Next, the Cayman company sells right to the patent to an Irish subsidiary of Company A, which markets and sells the software in Europe.
And that is so correct, Brother Keith, because outside of Switzerland, where they said if you wanted to hide your money, you hide it in Switzerland, but a lot of them utilize the small island of the Cayman Islands to deposit, to use their depository banks to deposit money there. So a lot of times, I think some of the laundering of money went through that particular sector, before it would go to its final destination in Switzerland. I think that is Bern, Switzerland. Am I correct?
That would seem correct, yes. The Irish company thus pays low taxes on European sales and remunerates its American patent through licensing fees paid in dollars to the Cayman subsidiary. Note that at this point, the Irish subsidiary has entered the euro-dollar market to transform its euro receipts into dollar deposits and then has transferred them or those deposits to a bank in the Cayman Islands, just like you were just talking about. This bank can now engage in euro-dollar funding with its dollar deposit. Meanwhile, the Cayman company can lend to the parent firm at a zero interest rate to bring profits home, or can purchase the parent firm's assets. Taxes have been minimized with no violation of law. This is exactly what they're doing with your birth certificate and that entrance into the commercial system here. They're dependent upon you people, and they do the same thing. Now let us examine kleptocratic transaction that uses a similar set of channels. A politically exposed person in country A wishes to benefit from a privatization scheme of a state-owned company. To do this, the private or politically exposed person sets up a company in Cyprus, which has a tax treaty with country A. There's the ticket right there. The tax treaty.
And Keith, what brings to mind for myself with that, the two particular banks would be the Scotiabank or the Scotia banks, and I believe they were under Irish consideration. I'm not really sure, but I believe that would be the two banks that's utilized between the countries of the United States and Britain.
Might very well be. I'd have to look into that, but it might very well be. Either way, this is what's happening. The individual then swaps shares in the worthless Cyprus company owned by him and the valuable firm in country A. Thus, the country A firm's profits are now captured, and it is effectively privatized. This is absolutely the opposite of what's going on here in America. You are being publicized. Your private capacity is being publicized. And that is how their economic structure is privatized. You see the usufruct subrogation there? The firm in Cyprus then sells its shares in dollars to another firm owned by the PEP in the Cayman Islands, thereby eliminating any tax liability and creating a dollar deposit in the Cayman Islands. Again, these chains of firms have entered euro-dollar markets to both convert cash flows from These chains of firms have entered euro-dollar markets to both convert cash flows from country A to dollars and to then deposit these receipts. The PEP can now use his dollar deposit to purchase property in London or to make investments in an American PR campaign. Again, a dollar deposit is now created within the Cayman Islands or Caymans, and with the likely exception of laws in country A being broken, nothing illegal has happened. The parallels between tax optimization and corruption are so strong that the illegality of the latter is only present because in the United States, we have made tax optimization legal and acceptable de jure. Again, taxes are voluntary. Moreover, both of these schemes have created euro-dollar deposits that can then be lent and borrowed in the global dollar system to fund trade, investments, and capital goods that are completely unrelated to these transactions. The incentives for not tampering with this existing system are thus quite high. The incentives for not tampering with this existing system are thus quite high. In other words, you have a great capability of bringing in greater profits because of the less tax liabilities. And if you violate them, there are heavy penalties. Why would you enter into a system that's voluntary when you can do it without taxes at all, maximizing your profits? Why help them maximize the tax? The offshore financial system was created in the wake of the collapse of the Bretton Woods system as a means to avoid high-cost political decisions while allowing an increasingly globalized financial system to serve the needs of the global elite. While this elite was largely in line with the interest of the United States, the national security establishment has paid little attention to the misery that the offshore world has caused due to lost tax revenue, illegal privatization of public assets, and financial instability. And while they say illegal privatization of public assets, the public can't have assets. And financial instability. Now, however, that these structures are not only used by multinational corporations, but also by state-related actors that might threaten American sovereignty. The national security and foreign policy establishment has woken up. The tools it has offered us to combat these problems are a mix of relatively effective measures to boost transparency and some half measures that at best will try to restrict access to the offshore world to legitimate actors. Indeed, beneficial ownership legislation, now being championed by many in Washington, will not only help American officials push foreign counterparts to adapt their own transparency legislation, but give us better ideas about the American side of many transactions. However, there is an open question about whether this legislation alone will allow the United States to effectively deal with the holes of global sovereignty caused by offshore world. Efforts to empower civil society in corrupt states are noble, but will not address the root causes of what makes kleptocracy so simple: the easy movement of capital through offshore networks. Most importantly, these policies do not take into action the fact that such transactions are critical to global dollar funding. If the United States is really serious about fighting offshore financial kleptocracy, it has to put in some deep thought into what the outlines of a global financial system that replaces it would look like. At the original Bretton Woods conference, John Maynard Keynes proposed a global clearinghouse system denominated in an international currency called Bancor. U.S. Bancor. Get your PayPal cards out, folks. Get your PayPal cards out, folks. And let's see here. This card is issued by Bancorp Bank. Now there's a P on there. But that's where it comes from, folks. States would not actually use Bancor, but would settle accounts in it. States with persistent surpluses of Bancor would be charged a negative interest rate to encourage them to lend to states that need funding. Capital controls would help contain private international finances. It would be exceptionally hard for a new Bretton Woods to happen. However, we can simulate some of its features unilaterally and eliminate incentives for other countries to serve as nodes in the offshore system. A major reason that a country like the Cayman Islands might want to be a tax shelter is to attract foreign exchange to its country and thus have sources of financing for development, as well as to sustain the value of its own currency relative to a global funding currency like the dollar. The United States has a tool to sustain the purchasing power of the Cayman's currency: the central bank swap line. It's all about corporate swaps, folks. Swap lines have come into public consciousness during the 2008 financial crisis, when the Fed allowed major central banks to exchange their local currencies for dollars to backstop euro-dollar deposits. During the COVID-19 crisis, larger swap interventions prevented a general global economic collapse. The United States should consider giving countries with strong macroprudential policies, open trade practices, and most importantly for this piece, transparent financial system, pre-approved access to Federal Reserve swap lines. This would, of course, mean crowding out opportunities for private finance to intermediate global monetary transactions. However, if the United States is really serious about fighting global corruption and treating it as a national security threat, the problem has to be cut out at its root. You're the root. You're the one that depends on this financial system as if though you're a debtor and not understand that you're a creditor. Learn it. The centrality of private offshore banking and euro-dollar creation to global funding must be eliminated to counter global corruption, not only abroad, but at home. The United States, as the issuer of the world's dominant currency, has a responsibility to sustain this global public good in a manner that limits the ability of rentiers and oligarchs to exploit this public good. Without recapturing the role of global intermediation from private sectors, we will never solve the problem of kleptocracy. Let me read that again. Like I said, I didn't read this at the beginning with, so here we are, in one of the last statements and it's profound. Without recapturing the role of global intermediation from private actors, you quit acting like a public servant. Become the private people you're supposed to be. We will never solve the problem of kleptocracy. A national security strategy that addresses these new threats must realize that the enemy is not a set of particular corrupt individuals, but the structure of global capitalism itself. What do you think about that? You're muted.
Quite interesting. And you know, earlier this day, on Malika's platform, we were discussing about various things. And one of the things I remember something we talked about was verification. And I know we utilize the contract term or the identity number 48.52.212-5 as the heading under contract terms and conditions. And more, I decided to become inquisitive, like the cat, and look at other ones, basically, and literally, each code is broken down to specific on what they have all these other titles that is associated with how they utilize everyone within the scheme of things with all the agencies that they've created. And I yield.
Yeah. Yeah, all those federal codes and state statutes, folks, those are the contract terms and conditions. Those are the very contract terms and conditions. So when you start reading these codes and realize that's how they're contracting, that's how you can learn how to contract yourself. So when you recognize those words in the leases and stuff, I've got a lease here in front of me that we're getting ready to renew. And I want to show you something here. Oops. And it's called taking your due diligence to make sure you know what you're doing. And so I went through it, and I just highlighted everything. I made a copy. This is a copy of the lease, and so I made a copy. I went through and I highlighted everything. I read the whole thing, and I highlighted the important terms that we need to discuss. And one of the things I noticed is that there's no arbitration clause. So we're going to put an arbitration clause in there. And that's one of the main things that people have to realize in this contracting. Again, when it comes down to contracts, they are arbitrary already, and they're implied to have arbitration clauses. But if it's not there, you have to mention it specifically and set up an arbitrator that is agreeable in case things come to arbitration. And that leaves it out of the legal system of a court of law and on the private side. So that if there is a dispute, it goes to private arbitration and not a public venue in a court of law. That's the importance of learning how to contract and reading these contracts. So if it's not there, you can put it in there. If there's terms that are redundant or detrimental to you. In here, they mention resident, so I highlighted resident. Well, guess what, folks? They also use tenant and occupant. So if there's a difference, we need to know what those differences are. Well, the first one they use is resident, so I automatically get to highlight that and let them know I'm not a resident and I'm not a United States citizen. Those terms are impossibilities. For me, my companion, she was in fact a resident. She was deemed necessary by the board. She was a public education teacher. She did fill that public office as an officer or agent of the local municipality, and therefore now she has to reconcile the records because she's retired, but they've still got her listed as a United States citizen and a resident. If you are retired and no longer a resident, as that is an occupation, therefore you're not an occupant. That's why it's important to learn these terms, people. Really important to learn these terms and get through this stuff. Now, the next one we're going to look at is oops, wrong thing. Is murder or manslaughter of foreign officials, official guests, or internationally protected persons. Okay. Whoever kills or attempts to kill a foreign official, official guest, or internationally protected person. What is an internationally protected person? According to 18 U.S.C. 1116b4, internationally protected person means a chief of state or political equivalent, head of government, or foreign minister whenever such person is in a country other than his own, and any member of his family accompanying him. Any other representative, officer, employee, or agent of the United States government. That's that United States citizen. They made you a representative of that government. Now you are an internationally protected person as that case goes. So why are they making claims against you? A foreign government or international organization who at the time and place concerned is entitled, pursuant to international law, to special protection against attack upon his person, freedom, or dignity, and any member of his family then forming part of his household. The protection's already there. All you have to do is make the distinctions. Let them know who you are. And you're not going to be able to do that until you know who you are. Know thyself. You are not the United States citizen, but you are entitled to use one. The next one. You know how I like definitions. 8 U.S. Code. And Title 8 has to do with immigration and elective franchise. Just so you know, elective franchise. That's where you get your civil rights and your freedmen. Alien ownership of land, immigration, exclusion of the Chinese, the coolie trade, miscellaneous provisions, alien registration, nationality. We're going to see that nationality here in a bit too. As used in this chapter, the term administrator means the official designated by the Secretary of State. The term advocates includes, but is not limited to, advises, recommends, furthers by overt act, and admits in belief. Admits belief in. You've been indoctrinated to believe everything, folks. Why? So you can advocate. It's kind of like Mitchell in his perpetual victimhood as an advocate. The term alien means any person not a citizen or national of the United States. So what is a citizen or national of the United States? The term national means a person owing permanent allegiance to a state. The term national of the United States means a citizen of the United States. There is no difference. Upon the enumeration at birth, you are conferred a nationality of a United States citizen. A United States citizen is a corporate entity and not a nation. And therefore, you believe that you are a national when it is not a national capacity. Or B, a person who, though not a citizen of the United States, owes permanent allegiance to the United States. United States, except as otherwise specifically herein provided, when used in a geographical sense, means the continental United States. You owe an allegiance to the land. The land shall not be sold forever, for it is mine, and ye are strangers and sojourners with me. This is the one that gets most people, and I want to talk about it for a minute. Because when you owe allegiance to the land and you understand and comprehend these terms, you then turn around and understand why I said yesterday, amicus curiae, friend of the court, qui tam, in the name of the United States, tia temet, because I see future harm to myself and the United States as allies, and therefore I'm presenting this quo warranto because the states are not vying for my interest or the interest of the United States. See, it's a state polity game that's got everybody fucked up. Again, there is no birth registration in the United States. That's in the states, and each state has their own enumeration at birth and capitalize on that independently. That's the subrogation, the usufruct at the state level, where you're handing over your private assets to a public entity that is using them as private funding and publicizing everything so they can make those assets their private assets. That's the only reason these politicians get involved in this game. They want to build their assets, and they know the assets of the slaves are easy to acquire. So let's take a look at the next one. The next one is protection of American interests. Without America, there wouldn't be the United States. Without the people of America, there wouldn't be the United States. Again, it's the people of America that are the national treasures. There are no monuments in this land that weren't made and created by Americans or for the American purpose. And again, without the American people, none of that would exist. We wouldn't have this cultural exchange that we have in these modern times. And granted, it came at the devastation of the native people on this land, and my apologies for any of my forefathers. Again, a great atrocity. Protection of American interests. Officers of the Foreign Service shall protect the rights and interests of the United States in its international agricultural, and they mention the agricultural first because everything, again, is dependent upon your sweat equity. You are the national treasure. You are the creditors. That's the only way they get a credit system is off of the sweat of your backs. Commercial and financial relations. In pursuance of this duty, they shall guard against the infringement of rights of American citizens in matters relating to commerce and navigation, which are based on custom, international law, or treaty, and not federal code or state statute, you ignorant fucks. Observe, report on, whenever possible, endeavor to remove discriminations against American agriculture, commercial, and industrial interests in other countries. Protect the national commercial reputation of the United States. Again, I urge you, if you want to step up and help right this country and make America great again, you have to learn how to contract. You have to learn how to negotiate these things in your interest, first and foremost, knowing that that's the only way you can uphold the interest of the American or United States entities. Period. You have to indulge in your own self-interest, folks. You have to quit being the slaves, thinking that your life is so great you get to sit on a couch and eat that processed food, and drink that poison drink, and watch somebody else's dramatic or comedic life. Because yours is so great. Time to get off your ass and start doing shit, folks. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is 42 U.S. Code 2000D. We mentioned this a few nights ago. Prohibition against exclusion from participation in, denial of, benefits of, and discrimination under federally assisted programs on ground of race, color, or national origin. So if they can't discriminate based on national origin, then they can't discriminate based on no national origin either. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou was cast from the womb, I sanctified thee. I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations, and therefore no nation's laws or ordinances can sanction the word of your prophet, so long as you use his word as the prophet. It is not about you, it is about the message. Make it worthwhile. That's your investment in yourself. And I suggest you do it under the full armor of God, just like David did when he defeated Goliath. You too can defeat this Goliath. No person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. None. Did you know the courts are funded by the United States? Did you know the states are funded by the United States? Did you know those are all federal investments? They ceded their jurisdiction because they didn't know how to do it by themselves or as a protection of inland states landlocked from waterways and no access to the international laws. And that's effectively what they've done to you in this indoctrination system, is they've landlocked you and made you subject to the admiralty laws of the sea because they found a way around it and brought it onto the land. Yes, it's the color of law. Those, like I said, folks, those statutes and federal orders are nothing but contracts. Like Iman said earlier, it's 48 CFR 52.212-5. And the very title of that code says, contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes or executive orders hyphen commercial items, commercial services. So this means anytime that they're providing a commercial service or commercial good, it is already federally funded in a contract with the states, and it's done through codes and statutes. I really urge you people to think about every word before you. Every word before you. Residents, occupants, you, your premises, tenancy, landlord, check, electronic payment. And by the way, this is a credit device. Okay? This is a device to obtain money, property, labor, or services on credit. All you have to do is put the credence in it, the merits. You have to have the merits, the spiritual credence to think thoughtfully, to make sure this is a faithful saying that I will, that thou constantly affirm that he who believed in God be careful to maintain good works. These are good and profitable unto men. If you want equity, you must first bring equity. You have to be careful to maintain good works. Titus 3:8 is one of the best equity verses in the Bible because it specifically speaks on that. If you want equity, you must first bring equity. So if you want to make sure that the effects are good, you have to make sure that they're good from the beginning. That means you have to have the eyes and ears to look at them appropriately so you can disperse the words and their value for their credit. Again, the spiritual credence, the words of God. I'm not a resident. I'm not an occupant. I'm not a tenant. This is not a residence. And despite in that lease it says you can't put any signs on the doors or windows, the fuck I won't. I have an international right and an obligation, which this law is inconsistent with, that says I'm supposed to give a forward sign showing that I'm not a belligerent combatant, showing that this is our temple. It is not for assault. We are peaceful people. We are not armed. We are armed with our word only. And you cannot deny us that right. So I have to be able to put it in the contract. I have to let them know that that's a violation of international law. If you guys don't understand this stuff, I urge you, start asking questions. Even if it's asking Google. Even if it's asking Google. Again, Google is not something bad. If you ask Google, make sure you don't just use the top source. I've been known to go through pages and pages of Google on one question to make sure I know what I'm talking about when I use that information and discern what is right in my mind. This means you have to look on both sides of the track too. If you think something is good and you don't know the other side of the track, it's like that greener crashers on the other side of the fence. You might find a gem.
That is so true, my brother. It's very true. Just like we were always taught. Before you cross the street, you look both ways. You look front and back before you cross.
Yep. So you got anything else on this? I'm sure that probably wasn't too astounding to you, man, because you've been in this for a while and you're familiar with how things are working. Is there anything that you got to put in this?
The only thing, my brother, is what I've learned from the different community that I partake in, and learning from my other brothers and sisters, including yourself, and my own intuition and inquisitiveness by reading. Today, I would say earlier today, I kind of chuckled because someone on Malika's call actually mentioned about reading is fundamental. And it's for the
Absolutely.
mantle. The mantle is really the mantle. It's the shelf, the shelving. Your shelving within yourself, within your mind, within your heart. And once you bring that all together and you become whole, everything starts coming together.
Yep.
Because everything is already within us.
Yeah, and that's part of that. The correct word there is fundamental. That's part of what funds your mentality is the knowledge from your observances. That's your true funds. That's what gives you credence is your knowledge. Again, that's the benefit. So I urge you once again, pick up a book and start reading again. Get particular concise English handbook first. I would prefer that. Get a concise English handbook. Learn the concise English so you can start recognizing it. These codes are not babble. They say things very clearly. They use plain writing. And many of them are very short and easy to comprehend, like the last two we looked at. Very easy to comprehend. You're supposed to protect your interest. You are the foundation of this nation. So you have to protect your interests. When you realize how to protect your interests, then they can't steal them from you. And it helps protect their interests. It's only by allowing these states that take advantage of your interests that makes the United States look bad. Again, I urge you to start learning how to communicate, and that comes from reading and comprehending appropriately. So I'll tell you again, I can explain this to you. I can sit here and read this stuff to you all day long, but I cannot comprehend it for you. That's your mentality. You have to do that. That's the part you have to fix. And that's that basic education that they gave you in this public education system. It's an indoctrination. You have to be able to come out of that. The only way you're going to do that is relearning what they taught you. They taught you to remember and believe, like we saw in the very first one. It's a belief system, folks. It's a presumption. And they will believe the record more than you until you are able to properly rebut it. You've been giving them the same information all your life. Why wouldn't they believe it? So with that, that brings us to the end of tonight's stream. I want to thank you again for attending. I apologize for not making it to Malika's this afternoon, but I'll be there Thursday for sure. And if there's anything else you got to say, please let us know, sister.
No, like you said, Keith, one has to have the knowledge, and the only way one can receive the knowledge, you have to put in the work. The fundamental part is the funding of the mental of your right and your left hemisphere. And you cannot have any doubts, because just as one of the scriptures that I read earlier today was First John's, I think it was First John's chapter 4, verse 18, where it talks about not having any fear.
Yes,
Perfect love.
living without fear. You can't have any room in your heart for perfect love if it's filled with fear. And when you have perfect love, there is no fear because there's no room. The perfect love is fulfilling.
And the
So,
knowledge is the knowledge. Think about what I
yep,
just said.
yep, yep, absolutely. And Metaphysician says, I got a question. Would laminating any legal or lawful documents or instruments have a negative effect on them? No, in fact, it would have a positive effect. You don't want to give them laminated legal documents, but there would be no problem laminating your own so that you could keep them in good shape and they would be copied. You could copy them at any time. There is nothing in the law that I know of that says you can't laminate your own stuff. And that would be your originals, particularly after you've already signed them. That way they can't be forged. They can't be doctored. Now, there are certain situations where you're not going to be able to do that because you have to have certain documents attached. You know, your original statement or certificate, a financial statement, da da da, and they're supposed to be attached. You can't attach laminates. They have to be in their original form. But for your own legal documentation purposes in your own library, for documents that are copyable and distributable to multiple different agencies, sure, no problem. I see.
Again, Brother Keith, I am grateful to all. You know, when you think about everything anyone has come through, you have to thank the Creator not only for the good, but for the bad, because it molds you into the man or the woman that you have become in this time period that we're in. And I
Yes,
yield.
yes, absolutely. I mentioned that yesterday in my the stream I did yesterday morning, where I got a little emotional about my son's death. You know, I have to take responsibility for everything I do in life, both the good and the bad, and that comes with not having the knowledge of taking care of my own family life. And like I said, he's passed on of SIDS, they say. And after I did my research, I come to find out I probably shouldn't have been giving him those vaccinations. So, you know, again, it's on me. Physician, heal thyself. The birth registration and all that, I didn't know about that back then. So he was registered. Both my children were. So it comes around to bite you in the ass sometimes, but that's the part about being a true man, a true adult, a true child of God, and being able to admit the truth in everything, including your own faults. Criticism is so paramount, and you have to be the best criticizer of your own self. When you learn how to do that, ain't nobody else can criticize you and hurt you. It's like water off a duck's back. So it's a very important prospect of learning how to live as an adult, is being able to accept your own faults. None of us are perfect. So, all
We're
right.
just
Well, with that,
imperfectly perfect. That's all. Imperfectly perfect.
absolutely, absolutely. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for your support here. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe button on your way out if you haven't. There's PayPal link down below for anybody that wants to share some love. It would be greatly appreciated. I do need a little help here and there, so please hit that and help out. And in the meantime, remember, I love you. I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back or not. And that's to say, I don't care if you hate me. That's on you. So may God bless you and have a good night.